Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 253. Introverts Prioritising their self-care. The whole self-care thing has become a bit overdone in the past few years, don't you think? As a result, it's become too shallow and wants-based. I like to make a point of differentiating between wants and needs because they serve a different purpose. Wants are like the icing on the cake. They sweeten things, and sometimes so much so that they make the cake a bit sickly, and they are just a bit of decoration. Needs, however, are those things without which I don't function well. They are the substance of the cake itself and what sustains us. So when I'm talking about my self-care needs as an introvert, I'm talking about the things that enable me to show up as my fully expressed self, energised and on good form. And no amount of bubble baths, pedicures or superficial massages are going to do that for me. So in this episode, my intention is to enable you to establish what real self-care looks like for you, so that you can implement an actionable plan for your own well-being to see you through 2025. More than that, the way I'm going about this means that you should have the support you need from those around you. If I'm going to really look after myself, I need to focus on a number of different aspects, including my mental, emotional, physical and social health. Did the social part surprise you? I know there are some who conflate introversion with social anxiety, but the reality is we are human, and like it or not, humans are social beings. We just have to figure out how to socialise healthily. In fact, this is so important that I'll be devoting a whole episode to social and emotional intelligence very soon. For this episode, though, I thought it might be helpful to take each of those 4 areas one by one and see how they might be captured on your needs chart. I know I've spoken about this concept before, and it really is the best way for everyone in a household or a relationship to have an explicit understanding of the needs of the people around them. A needs chart is created by spending time with those in our lives to discuss, explore and understand what each of their daily or regular needs are. When we have those conversations, there is no judgment, nothing is off limits, and we take people's needs seriously. For instance, in order to function well, one of the things I need is about 2 hours a day where I can be quiet and allow myself to get into flow with whatever I'm doing. It might be work, it might be crafting, it might be reading or replenishing. Without this 2-hour window of time, I don't function well. Some of you listening might be thinking, well, that's very selfish of you, Jo. Is it though? Is it really? You see, I can get by with less than this. But beware, if I'm not functioning well, there will eventually be a cost. And it's usually not just me that suffers. You see, the thing is, this isn't just about me, and therefore it's not selfish. Each member of the family or household gets to do this, so we have a better understanding of what we each need. It can be quite funny listening to what young children need, but I cannot stress enough how important it is to get them used to these types of conversations at a young age. It helps to raise more resilient, more assertive children who know their worth and are less likely, therefore, to be the victims of narcissistic abuse. Once we know each other's needs, we then capture this on some kind of visible chart that is kept on view for everyone to review and revisit. Think of it a bit like a wheel of life diagram pinned to the fridge. And let me tell you why this bit is so important. When tensions are rising and someone is unhappy, upset or angry, as a family unit, explore which of that person's needs are not being met. That enables us to address the situation from a very different perspective, and in my experience, a more productive perspective. And because we're constantly growing and developing, remember to discuss if our needs are changing and then update the chart accordingly. Once we have the chart, we can then start to establish self-care routines that enable us to meet our needs more often than not. In fact, I'm going to go one step further this time and suggest that managers do this with their team members. Let's stop paying lip service to our responsibilities by trotting out trite sayings like, "Our people are our greatest asset." Let's do the real work that makes the statement true. Are you with me? Brilliant. I'm pretty sure you'll be surprised at what you hear from your team members, and what's even better is how their engagement and productivity will increase as a result. Be prepared to handle the shock initially though, as I bet no manager has ever asked them this before. And of course, you'll need to declare your own needs too. Don't ask them to do something you're not prepared to do yourself. Now, as I mentioned earlier, my intention is that my self-care routines, rituals and remedies align with at least those 4 aspects: my mental, emotional, physical and social health needs. My self-care for my mental health ensures that my thinking, learning and decision-making functions are sound. I find puzzles and quizzes to be very good for this, especially if they require lateral thinking, spatial awareness and logic as opposed to regurgitating facts. I also look after this aspect of my mental health through my love of learning and reading. When it comes to my emotional health, my self-care involves things that enable me to feel, express and manage or regulate my emotions. Having got so much better over the past few years at emotional literacy and the nuances of my emotions, my emotional health is probably in the best place it has been for years. And that's in spite it being really tested this year with the sudden death of my best friend and the rapid demise of a close colleague. Caring for my physical health is probably the one area that I've neglected the most since the pandemic, although I've taken steps to bring that back to where it needs to be recently. I attended a wonderful metabolic retreat in October 2024, and I've booked to go back in March 2025. What's so wonderful is that this is actually a holistic retreat that fulfills so many of my self-care needs, but rather than wait until then, I'm focusing now on moving more. Now, what I'm not going to commit to is becoming a gym bunny, as that's never been me, and I doubt that I will start or be consistent at that at my age. However, I am committed to daily walking, qigong and yoga. That leaves my social health, the one area that might have surprised you. Whilst I need to limit the overstimulation that comes from being with loud people or in noisy places for too long, a certain level of socialising is necessary for good mental health too. I might be an introvert, but I need relationships where I experience meaningful connection and a sense of belonging. My trusted work colleagues, some special clients, my smallish circle of dear friends, my awesome team and my accountability buddies take care of my needs in this respect. I need generative, inspiring, and even challenging conversations with some of these people every week to keep my social health in good condition. Now, when I start to look at the things on my needs chart, my 2 hours of quiet time per day are what I need for my mental and emotional health, which by their nature includes my psychological health, as I see it as a mix of the two. I need some time by the sea at least once every 14 days, as the ozone in the air and the sound of the waves on the shore help me physically and emotionally. I'm not one for lazing around on beaches anymore. I loved that as a younger woman, but it does nothing for me anymore. That's a great example of needs changing over time. I need a deep tissue massage to care for my tense neck and shoulders at least once a month. And from experience, I know that superficial, fluttery type massages just won't do. I need to spend time socially about once a month with friends who I can laugh with. Don't worry, I do laugh at other times, but I find there is something so wholesome about being able to laugh until I get cramp in my cheeks and beg for it all to stop. I need to spend time every month on creative activities, as I'm a frustrated artisan and I get immense pleasure out of seeing something develop from raw materials into a finished item. This is another need that has been neglected until fairly recently. My wreath making at the beginning of December was a good start, and I plan to schedule more time for things like that in 2025. Maybe I'll even get to attend that shoemaking course. Creative activities are so good for my mental and emotional health, and usually I get a bit of social benefit too. Here's what I'll not be doing though. I'll not be setting the alarm for 5 a.m. every morning and getting into work or the gym because some guru says that's what successful people do. Good for them, and for you too if that's what works for you, but it's not for me. I have a peculiar view that great self-care is also enjoyable, not something that you do just because it's good for you. That denigrates the intelligent, complex, sophisticated humans that we are. I will, however, be paying closer attention to the warning signs that signal that I need to up my self-care, like when my sleep becomes erratic, or my neck and shoulders become so tense that my ears rest on my shoulders, or when I'm uninspired and unproductive, and most importantly, when I'm not feeling fulfilled and not flourishing. Then I'll look at what need isn't being met and which of those 4 aspects of health need supporting. Once it's clear to me, I'll be able to do something that doesn't just drop me out of the system and potentially waste my time, but I'll do something or be somewhere that really nourishes me. So in this episode, I've differentiated between wants and needs so that when you plan things for your self-care, you know they're really going to make a difference in the way you need them to. I even invited you to try this approach with your team at work so that they might know that they really are your most valuable asset. I outlined 4 areas of health that are important to me, and you may have more that you want to take into account, like financial health. I've been pretty open and shared some of my needs and how I get them met, which leaves me with a question for you. What will you do to care for yourself in meaningful ways? And if your answer is nothing, I don't have time, or something similar to that, please be honest and acknowledge that you're deprioritizing your own self-care. How does it feel when I say that? If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.